When I was 16, I would jump on my trampoline out back for hours every night. Literally hours. I would listen to my iPod and just daydream to get away from a rough family life. One night, when I was jumping, a kid ran past our fence at full speed, carrying a box about the size and shape of a skateboard. He ran to the park behind my house and held the box by its edge, then tossed it into the air so that it flipped a few times before landing on the ground. At this point, I was a little weirded out because he was just standing over it and staring for a pretty long time. Then, out of nowhere, he just bolts, full speed, back past our fence like he didn't even notice I was there. I just kept jumping and staring at where the box was. Here's where it gets creepy. The box looked like it was starting to move. Then something started to rise out of it. I actually stopped jumping and rubbed my eyes and stared, as what looked like a fully grown man rose out of a box that was like 2 inches thick. He had an elongated head with no hair. His skin was orange, and his eyes were huge and pitch black. He raised one arm up to his side, and the box just kind of went into what I can only describe as a trench coat. He then walked over to the only pavilion we have at the small park, grabbed the metal beam holding up the overhang, and started to bang his head hard onto the beam, over and over. I couldn't move. I had no idea what I was seeing. Then, without warning, he just stopped, and his head quickly whipped around and stared right at me. It was like he could feel me watching him. A giant, and I mean giant, smile came across his face as those dark eyes just stared at me. He then tilted his head back and forth a few times. I had goosebumps, and my eyes started to tear up. Even retelling this is making my hair stand on end, because I will never forget that look. And as I was staring and about to cry, he turned around and kind of phased down the road, off into the distance. And that was it. He was gone.
I'm 18. My dad is dying. I'm home alone taking care of the house and my little brother. My dad is in the hospital wasting away. At this point, he's got like a 50% chance of making it. I'm sleeping in my parents' bed while they're away at the hospital. I'm sleeping alone. I'm lying on the side facing the door and a figure is there. But seeing him isn't frightening in of itself. He looks weird. Reddish skin, black eyes, black trench coat. But it's not his appearance that unnerves me so much. It's the way he looks at me. That's what terrifies me. He's standing in my parents' doorway, and I feel like I'm gonna puke. I blink, and he's gone. Whatever, bad dream. A couple of days later, again, I see him. He's one single step closer. I get the same feeling, the same dread, the same terror. Again, I blink, and he's gone. This continues for some time. Always a single step, never more, never less. One night, he eventually makes it to the bedside. He bends unnaturally to the side, rotating his spine sideways 90 degrees. His face is now level with mine. He is looking at me. And then he smiles. He is smiling at me. The smile makes him look insane. But he always seems content. He knows something I don't know. A few days later, my dad died. He didn't die on that day, but he died soon afterwards.
This has haunted me for a long time. I was about 19 or 20 at the time, and I was living in Savannah, Georgia. I drank a lot, using a crappy fake ID, and I worked at this terrible job as a grunt labourer. The kind where you go to those temp labour agencies like Able Body and Labour Finders. I'd show up at 4 a.m, work until 5 p.m, then drink myself to sleep, after only taking home maybe $60 for the day. I was supposed to go into work on this particular morning, but I decided to skip. I call the girlfriend and tell her I want to go to the beach. I had already started drinking. She comes over, we pack up some rods, hop in my big ugly van and head to Tybee Beach. I decided to have a drink across from the beach at this little bar. Shortly after ordering my drink, I get this really weird feeling. I become hyper aware of my surroundings. The door opens, and I see this guy walk in out of my peripheral vision. There was a seat between me and my girlfriend, but the bar was empty at like 9 a.m, and he could have sat anywhere else, yet he chooses to sit right between her and I. Then he starts doing this thing with his fingers. The bar top was reflective, and he takes his 2 fingers, like 2 little legs, and just starts walking with them, skating with them, on top of the counter. This isn't something out of the ordinary, but I took notice because when I was in school, I did that all the time. I pretended I had rollerblades on my fingers and that I was skating around my desk. So I became kind of mesmerized for some reason. That's when he looks at me, and in this really thick kind of Germanic or Nordic accent, he says, "I notice you're a man who pays attention to detail. I'm also a man who pays attention to detail." Now, before I continue, I have to describe this guy. He had this short, spiky hair that was bleached at the tips, kind of like a late 90s style. He had really expensive clothes on, like a nice Prada orange leather jacket, nice designer jeans, really nice boots. He seemed like a kind of gay guy with awesome fashion sense and really distinctive taste. I always remember this because I thought to myself, some weird homeless crazy guy just couldn't have afforded those clothes. Anyway, the other thing that stuck out was his eyes. They were piercing grey. It reminded me of like a husky's eyes, but his pupils just stayed this disturbing pinpoint size. They were just extremely small, which caused his look to be kind of terrifying. His teeth were normal, but somehow strange at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. They were sharper than they should be, as if they were filed slightly. His hands were normal, but his fingernails were slightly long and pointed, as if he deliberately did it. He kept licking his teeth too, as if he was salivating. The thing about this guy is you look at him and everything seems normal but off at the same time, so you're questioning if you're crazy for thinking this. This guy then begins to start talking about the relationship between me and my girlfriend. But really strangely, he's talking about how beautiful she is and how I should pay more attention to her. Shortly after he began talking like this, I had this almost knowing feeling come over me. Like I knew this guy was not a human. I look at my girlfriend and say, "You need to leave." She just kind of looks at me like she knows too. Without a word of protest, she gets up quietly and leaves. Later I learned that she went next door to get a coffee. That's when this guy literally says to me with the utmost confidence, "You were supposed to go fishing today." He points at the beach across the street. "If you had, I would have drowned you in that ocean." And I kid you not, he hissed at me. Then, once again, for some reason, this overwhelming calm had come over me. I just ask, "Who are you?" He answers back with this crazy guttural language, like "Akbak," but it was really long. It sounded Arabic or Hebrew or something. So I say it in a way that I can understand. Then he says, "You can call me Jimmy C. I jumped off the San Francisco Bridge years ago, and we've been watching you." From there on out, he never referred to himself as me or I, but only we. The conversation became something very strange after this. He was saying things like, "We see you taking a bath. We wish we too could feel the warmth of the water and the comfort of the steam." He kept buying me drinks too, specifically whiskey sours. It was like he had an endless supply of money. After I don't know how long, because I kind of lost sense of time, I told him I'm going to leave. So I walk next door and get my girlfriend, and she's stone silent. We start driving home, and we don't say a word. Then I ask, "Do you know what that was?" And she just says, "That was a demon."